Did you look at the announcement?
Good afternoon, everyone. Here we go. Sometimes probably 5. Well, and continue to be well. Sweet Parsha of Truma. So the Jewish people didn't give money to the erection of the base of the Mishkan. They gave items in kind, raw material that would be used. The Torah outlines for us what was necessary: kesef, zov, and nechoshes, and the argonon and tcheles, oros elim, odomim, oros tchoshim, atzei shitin, emen lamor. All of these things were given. They are things that are given in kind. So the question arises, all the Meforshim discuss, where did Jewish people have all of this stuff? They're in the middle of the Midbar. It's a desert. There's no Walmart next door to go and buy anything. And this is a wide variety of goods that they need. Some of it is textiles, some of it is wood, some of it is leather, and then there's precious stones, and then there's metal. Where do they have all later? So much was contributed that it was more than enough. There never was a shortage here. So the portion that indicates two creeds. One is that it says right. They went out from Egypt. They took everything they needed from Egypt.
Everyone, please mute yourself. Everyone, please mute yourself.
So one idea that's given is that they had all of this from the Egyptians. And since the Jews took whatever they saw in the homes of the Egyptians, and the Egyptians had all of these things in the rich houses. They had gold and silver and bronze, and they had fancy textiles. So they had. And because of that, therefore, that's why the Torah could ask that they should contribute, because of the fact that this was the booty from Egypt, not only from Egypt, but from Yam Suf as well. And therefore, they had all the raw materials they needed. The Meforshim, however, say that this we rely on the Gemara already. There are certain things that they couldn't get from Egypt. One was Oros Tchoshim. there's an animal called the tachash. We don't know what that animal looks like. The Gemara says it became extinct. It was created for the Mishkan, and it hung around for the 2,000 years until the Mishkan, and then it apparently existed there in the desert, and they were able to trap it and to skin it, and then it became extinct. So we don't have a tachash today. But it was for the purpose of the Mishkan itself. So there's an important lesson here. Everything in the Bria, everything in creation, everything in nature has a purpose. Sometimes we understand the purpose, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're able to fathom and investigate the purpose. And then other times it just looks to be for no reason. But nature is so perfectly balanced that everything has a purpose. I recall in the United States, after the Second World War, so when the government was spending money on infrastructure, so they wanted to build a large dam on the Tennessee River to prevent that the river should flood, and they would get much more arable land. It was a great project on which they spent hundreds of millions of dollars then, but it had a strange effect that all the fish in the river started to die. And that was a big industry because there were a lot of fish and it was needed. And if the fish died, so then the animals that lived off the fish also left. It was a whole ecological chain. And they found out that the whole problem was that there was a little creature called the snail darter. This snail darter could only exist if the river was not dammed. If you dammed the river, then the flow was not sufficient for the snail darter to survive. And apparently there were fish that live off of the snail darter, and there are animals that live off the fish. The whole food chain was all destroyed because of this little, so they had to redo the dam. Spend another few $100 million because of this small creature. So every creature in God's world that is so finely balanced, so miraculously created, everyone has a purpose. So the tachash has the purpose that it would provide leather skin to cover the roof of the Mishkan. After it fulfilled its purpose, so then it became extinct and it no longer exists. That's what the Gemara says. Then we have the famous Medrash, Rashi quotes it here. Where did they have atzei shitim? Where did they have lumber, timber? Again, in the desert, it didn't grow. So Rashi brings the Medrash that Yaakov Avinu, when he went down to Egypt, he already saw the Nevuah that they were going to have to build a Mishkan, and that in the Mishkan they would need atzei shitim. So he took along atzei shitim that they should plant in Egypt. In the Jewish neighborhood, so to speak, in Goshen, they planted the atzei shitim and they cut them down and took it out with them when they left Egypt. So that's already miraculous, but that's already the foresight of the Avos, which is another concept that the Torah wants us to understand. The concept is that sometimes you do something that you know that you will not be around to witness its completion. but you do it because of the fact that later generations will benefit from it. Whether the later generations are your own progeny or not makes no difference. The Gemara tells us about the man that planted a certain tree that takes 70 years for it to reach its ability to produce fruit. And they saw that the person who was up in years was planting the tree. So they said to him, "What are you planting the tree for? You know, you're not going to be here to have any of the fruit." And he said, "Somebody planted for me 70 years ago, so I plant for the future as well." So that Gemara points out to us how we look at generations, how we look at the future. So Yaakov Avinu, he looks at the future. He saw there's going to be a Mishkan, and the Mishkan, they're going to need Atzei Shittim, so he prepared Atzei Shittim, even though he did not need it himself. That's it's almost the same idea as the food chain. That the reasons that exist don't exist only for us. They're not only for temporary convenience, but they have a long-range purpose. And in the long-range purpose, then all of it somehow comes to fruition and exists as well. And the same thing the Gemara says regarding the diamonds and the precious stones that they had. There are different opinions, again, where they got that from. Again, either they got that from Mitzrayim, but others say no, that also came from the treasure house of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That they long before knew there was going to be a Choshen. And that's what the Medrash means, that Yosef HaTzadik, he saw that his stone would be missing with the story of the woman of Potiphar, Eshes Potiphar. So he was aware there was going to be a Choshen, and on the Choshen will be these stones, and therefore they prepared the stones as well, so that the later generations would have it, and the Mishkan would be able to be built complete and whole. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Yomer Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakot Tzitz Yisrael L'Fichal Chir B'Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Aman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. Amen.